name is Ash Hamilton. I'm with horror-fix.com. You're listening to Night Terrors Radio. I'm accompanied by my lovely, gorgeous, beautiful co-host, Jim Chandler.
Hello.
Over there shaking his moneymaker like only he knows how to do.
That's the way to shake it.
And we have a great, great guest with us tonight. You know, I always love it when we can get local people here to the studio, especially because we're sort of out in the middle of nowhere, and people pop into this little area which is filled with all of this horror movie memorabilia and movie posters and just different kinds of like arcanum sort of spread throughout it. It's something you don't necessarily expect here in the backwoods of Illinois. So it's nice to have people here and sort of rejoice in the splendor of the things that we love. But it's also great because we get to see people in person, which we don't get to do that often. A lot of our guests come. We get those Canucks, man. I'm telling you, we gotta talk about the Canadian angle. We got a lot of Canadian people in here. We get people from out of the country, quite a bit, and then we have to constantly watch the internet connection, and that's always lovely. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's an adventure. It's always an adventure. So it's kind of nice we get somebody in here because when things do shit the proverbial bed, it's a little easier to rein it in get things back on track. So those of you who are watching live, we have 2 live shows back to back tonight. Our first hour, we have Larry Wilson. He is a local author. I want to call him a paranormal adventurer. I just like the sound of that. I love the sound of it's sort of the Indiana Jones of the unknown. You know, now I'm really building you up, Larry.
Thanks a lot. That pretty much describes it, though. So it's a good description.
So we can see our co-hosts. We can see our guests. Jim, wave at the camera.
Hello.
By the way, those of you who are watching are going to be watching the beautiful new camera that we have installed. Look at this. It actually looks official. Looks like we're doing something here.
We got real cats.
Yeah. We've got real cats, not the prop cats as usual.
And it's a black cat.
Not the remote control cats, you know, that stop halfway and start glitching out.
That's right.
Even though, let's face it, real cats do the same thing anyways, right?
On their own, yes.
So we've got some great stuff lined up tonight. Larry's going to talk to us not only about his books, but about some local places that he's visited, some places that he's researched and investigated. It's great, too, because... man, we're doing this at the greatest time of the year.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
I love really sort of, and this is when we start getting naughty, we're kicking in the back door of Halloween.
Yep.
That's how we do it with October. But we were lucky to have Eric Woods on last week. You know, he's with the Springfield Ghost Tour, the Lincoln Ghost Tour, Ghost Walk, and then we have Larry today. So we're hitting the local angle, and we're getting some good stuff. Next hour, boy, I do this promo in like one breath.
Is that right?
By the way, yeah.
Okay.
Spontaneous pneumothorax. That's what's going to end up happening at some point in time. I'm be trying to get through this. So doing this all in with, we also have a film that we are producing, another film that has the Horror Fix logo and label on it. My Girlfriend is a Serial Killer. We will have the main star as well as the DOP, the director, and person that's also bringing that local, guy Zach Tyndall. He hosts the Dead in Decatur Film Festival. He'll be hopping on with that bunch. So we got some great stuff lined up tonight. It's one of those nights where like I wish we had like the whole night. I wish we had 8 hours of free time instead of sort of chopping it up these hour bits. But you know, people get sick of me real easy. So maybe it's a damn good thing that we don't have all night. So we got some great stuff lined up. We're going to get right into the fray here in just a moment. For those of you that are watching, just some of the titles that Larry Wilson, the author that we have in the studio tonight, is responsible for, you're going to be able to see up here on the screen. Chasing Shadows, Dark Creepy Places, Echoes from the Grave, and a new book. What's the title of the new book, Larry?
The new title is Where Evil Lurks, and it's a little different than the first 3. The first 3 books basically are, each book discusses
locations that I personally investigated, as does Where Evil Lurks, but the difference being Where Evil Lurks talks about an incident that happened in 2008 after I investigated a murder house in Iowa, and it details the things that happened after I returned home and somewhat continue to this day.
We're going to go with a little bit of a genesis, the exploration of the origins of Larry Wilson. We don't go that far back.
That's fine. Yeah. Caveman days.
That's right.
But you know, I even though this is a relatively cliche question, but I still enjoy asking it because we get a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life.
Right.
I mean, I know why I got into the things that I'm interested in, and why even into my twilight years I am interested in them now. But hearing it from other people and hearing about some of their first-time experiences, whether it's a filmmaker or whether it's somebody interested in the paranormal, what got you into this? I mean, what piqued your interest?
Well, actually, my introduction to the paranormal was when I was 8 years old. Had nothing to do with ghosts, or at least as far as I know. But you know, as a kid, I grew up in Petersburg, Illinois. Graduated there in 1976. So basically first 17, 18 years of my life I spent in Petersburg. But I remember the exact date, and the reason I remember the exact date is kind of a coincidence, I guess you could say, or maybe more of a synchronicity. But it was September the 8th of 1966, and you know, it was growing up then in Petersburg, had the old antenna. Basically, there were 3 channels on TV. In the
fall of the year, you know, it gets dark early, so there's little time to play outside. Parents have you in by the time sunset's, you know, taking place. So I was bored this particular night, and our north window in our house, it faced a little railroad depot in Petersburg up on a hill. And as a kid, I liked to look out the window, and I would always, you know, when it was dark at that time, you have to cup your hands, you know, and put your eyes and your nose up against a window looking out. And as I was looking
up to the north, I saw the biggest, brightest, darkest, I call blood orange moon that I've ever seen. I mean, it was like something you would see in one of these comic books that you have, you know. But I'm peeking out the window with my hands, you know, like this, like I'm presenting to you now. But I'm watching this moon, and I mean, it's perfectly. You couldn't have taken a compass and drawn it more perfect. It was that big of a circle. It's probably the size of a $50 in the sky. So I'm watching this thing, and basically I'm watching this thing for a couple of minutes because I'd never seen the moon that big and bright before. And then suddenly I kind of gazed to my left a little bit, more towards the north, and there's the moon. So I wasn't staring at the moon, you know. So anyhow, I turned back at the object, and then all of a sudden, it seemed like it shot off to the northeast, and suddenly it's about half as big as it was originally. Then just within seconds it does the same thing again, so it's about half the size again, does it one more time, and then it disappears. But what was really weird about the whole situation is, you know, being a paranormal investigator, there's a lot of psychics in the business, a lot of investigators that are psychic, but I'm not one of them. I probably couldn't tell you if there was a spirit, you know, sitting on my lap. I just have no clairvoyance whatsoever. But after I saw this object for a little over a month, things would come to me and they would happen, and they were usually more on the negative side, you know. So, but after a month, you know, it seemed like the if you want to call it a gift or not, disappeared. It was in 2010 that Sam Morano from MUFON was at Lincoln Land, and there was a local meeting out there, and Sam was doing some presentations, and he was also doing his own little documentary, and he asked if anyone had stories. So I told him that I had a story for him. So Sam basically films my story, but as I'm telling him the story that I just told you, he's like nodding and smiling, you know. And so after we finished, I said, you know, Sam, it sounded like you'd heard that story before. And he goes, oh yeah, I've heard that many times. But he said, you know, Larry, what if I would tell you that maybe what you saw wasn't a UFO? Maybe what you saw was like a vortex that was closing up. You know, he said you maybe caught it at the right time, and then it looked to you like this object was, you know, moving away, farther and farther away from you. But he said, what if that portal was closing up? He said, we've had multiple reports from people over the years where they actually see objects coming out of these orange, large orange objects in the sky. So, but that was where my first touch of the paranormal was. And you know, as a kid, I always watched or listened to the old classic radio mysteries, and I watched the Hardy Boys, read the Hardy Boy books. You know, was just always fascinated with mystery. Then later in life, I became a private investigator. After a decade of that, just one particular time, I went down to Alton, Illinois, took a tour. The guy that gave tours had been doing it for 17 years, you know, and I said to him on a break, I said, hey, the guy's name was Gary, and I said, Gary, I said, tell me the truth. I said, you've been at this for 17 years, you've been an investigator. I mean, you must have seen some things that keep you coming back. And Gary basically said, you know, Larry, it doesn't matter what I tell you I have or haven't seen. The only way you're ever going to believe it is if you see it, you know, for yourself. He invited me to come along with him on a couple of investigations, and my thoughts were that I'd go with him a few times, you know, nothing would happen, and that would be the end of it. But basically, right off the bat, things happened, things were recorded, you know, I experienced things that I couldn't explain.
Now, the idea of talking about portals is something that has fascinated me.
Okay.
And it's interesting, too, that you would talk about not only the shape and the color, but the fact that people do see things coming out of these portals.
Exactly.
I've been fascinated, by the way, about the events surrounding the Skinwalker Ranch.
Absolutely.
And there have been accounts coming out of the ranch about these circular portals,
Yes,
things that appear to be celestial bodies, but closer to the ground. And then upon further investigation, there's things coming out of them.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's, I mean, I didn't see an object coming out, but basically everything else I experienced, it made sense when Sam, said that to me. More so than what I saw as something, flying off at a high rate of speed, but rather something closing up.
But those are those stranger than fiction moments. I mean, those are the moments when suddenly, because we have different levels, I think, of what people think the paranormal is. And usually what people think it is, even the people that don't believe it still look at the very superfluous sort of top level stuff, which is, I heard something, I think I saw an apparition. Or even when we go into the idea of UFOs and ufology, it's I saw a light in the sky that moved at an accelerated rate, or did something that modern aircraft can't do.
Exactly.
And then suddenly, it's like we take a left turn at Pant Shitter.
Yeah.
That's that small town in the middle of nowhere that you stumble upon. You sort of get lost and then take a left and you're there. But those things that transcend those superfluous paranormal details, and these are the things that pass strange, they pass bizarre. But I think because of, and I'm, for those breaking down the fourth wall here, something like a cell phone, something like just a technology that we have that's on us all the time. Right. Even when we had consumer, mainstream consumer merchandise that was readily available, lower overhead cameras, we still didn't have them on us all the time.
Right.
And now we have this thing that literally, I mean, this is, we're basically like warlords of the digital West. We're slinging it.
With the media now too, they're just more aware and they're looking. I mean, there's more people looking up. There's more people investigating or going on tours and those types of things. And I think one of the things that was told to me early on in this, when I met my first clairvoyant, and again I had no experience with clairvoyance, and was a little bit skeptical if they were legit or not. But I actually met a lady that turned out to be she blew me away basically with her abilities, and she told me things about me that it was like somebody was reading my personal diary. So she more or less proved herself to me that she was legit.
Thank God I have not met her.
Oh yeah, I mean, but she was just incredible, and she's actually, things she's told me make sense. They make more sense now after years and years of investigating than when she first told them to me. One of the things she told me was that the more that I delved into the supernatural, at some point I wouldn't have to go looking for things, that they would come to me. And basically that's panned out to be true, because my wife and I, we've been married for 35 years, and we've lived in two homes since we've been married. We never experienced anything unusual that we couldn't explain until I became a paranormal investigator. And now we've not only had things happen, noises, that type of thing, but we've also seen a solid figure in a house that my wife has also seen as well. We call him the Thin Boy. I've seen him twice. My wife has seen him once. But he basically is just a thin, solid-looking person. Always wears black, and I call it black long sleeves because it looks like he's wearing a black long sleeve sweatshirt. But you can't see his face. It's just grayed out. It's almost like somebody took finger paint and just smeared it out with gray finger paint. You can never see the face. But my wife, she's not interested in the paranormal. Not that she doesn't believe in it, but she just doesn't want anything to do with it. It's just nothing she wants to delve into. But she's also seen this Thin Boy before in our house.
Now, we talked about sort of the origin of the interest, the thing that you had seen. How long was it between sort of the boyhood interest and as you became older that you really started to pursue this in a manner where you're writing down your experiences, you're collecting, overall this overarch of your journey? When did that start to happen?
Well, the recording of it started probably in 2010. That's when I first started writing my first book. But I always go back to 1997 because it seemed like that it was at that point that I became unusually interested in the supernatural. And what happened in that year was in September of 1997, my wife and I lost a little girl. My wife was pregnant. Everything was going well, and then just out of the blue something happened. But this particular psychic that I mentioned earlier, the first time I saw her, I mean, this lady knew nothing about me, but one of the things she brought up was that I had an angel baby around me, and she was always there. But when we lost the child, nothing made sense, because we had sonogram pictures where actually my daughter's sonogram picture looked just like my son, who was 7 years older, and my son's 30 today. But it looked just like him, so everything was so perfect, but then all of a sudden everything just went so drastically wrong, and I never could understand that. But the day that I met this lady, and she started explaining that I have an angel baby around me, and that the angel baby wanted to let me know that before we come into this world, we choose our parents, and that she had chose me and my wife to be her parents. But something happened where she couldn't come to the physical world, and she had to stay on the plane that she was where she was. And so but anyhow, this psychic told me that your daughter's with you all the time. You need to talk to her. You need to ask questions. And she said the way you can get answers is you can ask a question of your daughter, turn the radio channel, ask a question, just flip the channels randomly and stop, and there'll be something that will give you a sign from her, like maybe a song or a lyric or something. And that's happened multiple times. But it seemed like it was at that point that something made me totally interested in the supernatural.
At one point in time, and this is no mystery to most people who know me, but at one point in time I was not so much just an atheist, but I was a complete nihilist and just didn't believe in anything. And events happened that changed me.
Sure.
And changed the way that I look at the world. And I think as a whole, I'm not saying that it made me an unshakable or unmovable theist, but what it did was it allowed me, first of all, to understand that I could be 80 and still have a fair amount of naivety, and that I didn't know everything.
Yeah. And
I think that was probably my biggest step, was recognizing the fact that I knew next to nothing.
and it seems like, again, I've been doing this now for 19 years, but it seems like that when you look back on investigations, and maybe investigations then moving forward, it seems like there's a connection between places that there shouldn't be connections. It's like one big puzzle that you're putting together a piece at a time, and then suddenly things start to make a little more sense. Although I will say that after 19 years of investigating, I know less today than I knew when I began. I'm more confused now about the paranormal and supernatural than I was when I began.
Now, a couple things that I definitely want to get to, and I sort of want to get to them at the start of the hour here to make sure that we do have enough time, is that you brought quite a few audio clips with you.
Yeah.
Which we're breaking the confines of Facebook Live. I want everyone to know this is where I just go on a rant.
I like rants.
I want everyone to know I do this for them.
That's right.
I do this for the audience. We are not just the typical talking heads.
That's right.
We have built a forum. We have been. I got to put the camera on me. This deserves it. We have built a forum where we can play video and play audio, and this is a multimedia experience. And this is not about me, although it's totally about me. This is for everybody else. So we've got some great stuff. We keep sort of pushing boundaries. So here's what I want to do: is I want to have some of these clips, and what I'll do is I'll load a clip, and then I want you to sort of give me a story behind the clip.
Sounds good.
And hopefully we won't kill everybody. We have a soundboard. Oh yeah, we've actually got a soundboard.
That's awesome.
We've got a soundboard.
We've been talking about it.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it. Hopefully, depending on the.
Well, that's the thing. Some clips, I mean, you can't control that. Some are just naturally, when you record them, they're just louder than others.
So let's see this first clip, and hopefully it's not going to kill us here in the studio and rupture our eardrums.
What's the clip title is?
And again, it's truncated, so it's
sure.
Villa.
Villisca.
Villisca.
This is a place that I investigated in 2000. Actually, I've investigated the place 5 times, but this is what the book is about. This is where this all stems from.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and play this clip.
Hello?
Now, and you may have to adjust the volume a little bit, but if you listen to it again, what you'll hear in this clip, this is from, and I didn't hear it at the time, but when I came home and started going through the audio, I found this clip. And on this particular night, this was early on when the incident started happening after I returned home. I was in my little home office. My wife was in the next room at the kitchen sink, and I was, reviewing audio. And I heard this voice that says, "Come here." So if you'll notice in this clip, there's basically 5 different things said. The first thing you will hear is the first thing that I heard when I was reviewing, and you'll hear a voice, and I describe it as sounding sort of like the old Boris Karloff from Frankenstein movies.
Oh, yeah.
You'll hear, "Come here." It's almost like it's being sang. And then that's all I heard. So I stopped, my audio, and I said, Kathy, that's my wife. I said, "You got to hear this. You got to hear this." So anyhow, Kathy listens to the clip. I said, "Do you hear it say 'come here'?" And she goes, "Yeah. But did you hear what it says right after that?" And I said, "No, let me listen." And I did. I mean, the chills went up on my back, the hair stood up on my neck. But if you'll notice, right after it says "come here," you'll hear my name whispered. It just simply says, "Larry." And then immediately following this, third part of the clip, it sounds almost like in a European or possibly German accent, but it says, "We have you to stalk." Followed by "tie her," followed by "I'll kill her." And there's various voices. Now, the Velisca house, it was June 10th, 1912, a family of 6 and 2 little girls who decided to stay
Before
overnight.
we go into that, Larry,
Yeah.
I want to replay the clip.
Okay, so you can kind of break it down.
Bring down the volume a little bit on
Okay,
this.
you may have to actually increase it a little. I'm not sure, but you adjust it as you need.
We'll go ahead and what we'll do is we'll play it both. We'll play it at a low volume first.
Okay.
That way people will really sort of have the strain, and sometimes that'll help them pick some elements out. And then we'll raise the volume and we'll play it back.
And if we
can,
we could possibly separate it piece by piece, if we can do that.
I tell you what, we'll go ahead and just give me a little hand signal.
Okay.
And I'll pause it.
Okay.
When we need to here.
Exactly. That's "come here."
Okay. So we'll go ahead and play "Come Here," and then what's after it?
You'll hear my name whispered.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got "Come Here," we've got Larry, and I'm actually playing it from the beginning because I think I like the context.
Yeah. And this was taken out of an 8-hour piece of audio.
Okay, so we'll do.
Now, after Larry, you'll hear "We have you to stalk."
Wow. Okay.
"Tie her." "I'll kill her."
Wow.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've discovered, actually myself and another investigator discovered by accident, about 1 out of 10 to 15 EVPs that you record, if you play them in reverse, they say something completely backwards. It doesn't match up phonetically. You couldn't spell it the way it sounds. But if you play this particular clip backwards, you will hear, "I hate you, Larry. I hear you calling." So, and I think I labeled it 5A, but if you can reverse that clip, highlight it and reverse it, that would be proof for you. But if not, the very next clip, I think it's maybe 5A or 5B.
I think we've got one labeled reversal.
Yep, that's probably it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the reverse of the clip we just heard.
Did you just heard? Now, there's 2 little things that I didn't mention before. You'll hear a voice say, "Hurry up," and then another one say, "I will." Then you'll hear, "I hate you, Larry," and then you'll hear, "I hear you calling." So
now, let me ask you a question. The fact that we've got so many layers. I mean, this is audio that's very textured. We've got a lot going on here. What kind of do you think it's a kind of intelligence, or do you think it's where the intelligence is originating from that allows this forwards and backwards audio coherency to happen?
I wish I knew. I wish I had an explanation for it, but I would say the latter. You know, I would say that more that it's coming. It doesn't seem like these things are coming from this realm, even though many times you'll record a clip that you don't hear, of course, but it's like they know you're there. You know, there's 4 or 5 clips we have here too that I call the math test, but it was at another location in Iowa. But basically, we were getting responses. I mean, it was perfect responses by knocking, and you'll see that here just shortly. But I have no clue. I mean, it's. I think it's coming from various places, and I don't think everything that I record are necessarily spirits. I think they come from other realms, somewhere from the time continuum, maybe the future, maybe the past, but who knows? But it doesn't seem like they're all ghostly in nature, although, you know, you can't see them most of the time.
Now, we've got a fourth one from that location.
Okay.
Can you have one over close to you?
It's a little girl, or a little voice sounds saying they're here.
Yeah. Now, let's digress for a moment, because, you know, as humans, we have the ability to make faces out of shapes. We have the ability to interpolate.
Pareidolia.
We've got an image.
Yeah.
We've got a memory, and we're able to fill in information. I can say, at least in my opinion, beyond the shadow of a doubt, you can't do that with that voice.
No, that's a clear voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a clear voice.
What are, and I'm not just talking about the average skeptic who is a skeptic but then sort of shakes their head and they're presented with overwhelming evidence, but the diehard skeptics, what are they saying about something like that?
It's basically like you said. It's like, you know, like you said, you know, visually it's pareidolia.
Yeah.
They basically will tell you that your mind is making up something that you think you hear. But there's some of these clips that I have, and you'll hear one from the Legacy Theater here in town. They're so clear that, you know, you can't deny what they're saying. And when multiple people hear the same thing without knowing what you think is being said, then there's a predominance of evidence, you know, that points to that's probably what is being said. But the key for me is, okay, even if it's not saying what you think it's saying, where is it coming from? You know, where does it stem from?
Now, we've got some local people popping in and out here on Facebook, and we've got some commentary from them, some questions. Now, we've got Gary Bach from Springfield, Illinois, apparently worked at the Virgil Hickok's house downtown.
Yeah.
And said that there was some activity there.
There absolutely is. I've investigated the Hickok's house, the old Norbandies, 3 or 4 times. Actually, Lindsay Hess used to work with Channel 20, and Jammer from Kiss FM, The Mix, you know, they were with me on one investigation. Todd Gedominski was one of the owners. This would have been 3 years ago on Halloween night. But one of the things Todd had told us, you know, was how the jukebox would play on its own, and we were in there 4:03 in the morning sitting in the bar. All of a sudden, we're sitting in the dark, and all of a sudden, all these multiple-colored lights start flashing all over behind the bar. We turn and look, and the jukebox starts playing. But of all the songs that it could play, it plays a song by Imagine Dragons called Demons. So, I mean, things like that, it made them believers, but I've also recorded quite a few EVPs in the old Hickok's house. And I've never recorded an EVP in the bar, but I've recorded them in the Hickok's house. And I think I have 1 or 2 maybe from there tonight. Let's see.
Let's move on to some of the math test audio.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, why math test? What's the significance behind that?
Each year I would take the people from Kiss FM, now The Mix, to a couple places. We would do an investigation in the summer, early fall, and then they would play audio that we would record on their Halloween show, or they would do it live. They would talk about the experiences. But one of the places we went to, and I believe it was 2014, was a Farrar school in Farrar, Iowa. It's a school that was closed down. I believe it was closed down in the late 1990s, but it's an old, country grade school. And we were on the 2nd floor. Sarah, who was also with the radio station, was with us, and another investigator. The other investigator was with Bonzi. They went down the hall on the 2nd floor to this old classroom. And we were at the opposite end of the hall. And Sarah and I heard the guys yell. And a few moments later, they came back and they said, "Man, we don't know what happened, but
all of a sudden there was this loud bang, and it scared the daylights out of us. So I told Bonds, I said, hey, why don't you and I go down to the classroom, and then the other gentleman's name is Chris and Sarah, they can go, the opposite end of the second floor. I'll go back down there with you. So we walked down there, and Bonzi's explaining this is what happened. So anyhow, Bonzi decides to sit at the rear of the room on the floor, and as I walk to the head of the classroom, all the old desks are in there and everything. And this idea pops into my head, okay, we're in an old school, let me try something. So I announced out loud, I said, okay, it's time to settle down. I said, my name is Mr. Wilson, I'm your substitute teacher, and I'm here for the day. It's time for math class. And then I explained that here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask math questions, and I want you to respond by knocking.
Now, first of all, when you said you're going to do math, was there an overwhelming ah?
No. But I tell you what does happen. I mean, 1 plus 1 or 0 plus 1 is an easy question. 1 plus 1 seems easy, but when I went 1 plus 1 plus 1, it seemed like it took a little longer for him to respond. But you'll hear from the clips that both Bonzi and I thought that maybe the other one was moving around making these knocking sounds by accident, but neither one of us was moving. And you'll hear our shock, but then I think it's the fourth clip, or maybe it's the third clip, that you will hear that instead of knocking like banging on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
you'll hear something else. But if you want to go ahead and play those, they're self-explanatory.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get the first one loaded up here. And again, let's see if we can't get it at a reasonable volume. And this is the first math test clip.
The immediate bang.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's interesting. You know what's also interesting? You know what we talked about earlier?
Okay.
About stuff going haywire?
Is it doing it?
Yeah.
This happens quite often when I do live.
Yeah. Now, luckily, it didn't affect anything live, which is great.
Okay.
Good.
But the soundboard totally shut off.
Did it really?
Now, what's interesting is that the soundboard, when it shuts off, always gives me the option for an error report. No option for an error report. Just shut off.
Wow.
Shut off like it was never on. Let's see if we can duplicate that.
Yeah.
So we will move on to the second.
See if that shows up in the crash report.
This is also the math test. You may have to turn the volume up a little bit.
Okay, let's see. We might not be getting anything. I'm going to try another clip here. Well, this is interesting. We're gonna do one more. We're gonna see if I can solve this here real quick.
Okay.
Did we get the conversation on the air where we talked about the sort of the
How things were working.
how things would go haywire?
Yeah. I don't know if we did. I think maybe that was before we went on.
Can I tell you a quick story while you're
Oh, of course, yeah.
technical work there? In 2011 is when my first book, Chasing Shadows, came out. So the publisher sent out press releases, and I was contacted by KHQA-TV in Quincy, Illinois. And the reason they contacted me was because some of the locations in the book are in Hannibal, Missouri, which is in their viewing audience. So anyhow, this was a live morning show at 6:30 a.m. is when I arrived, and so anyhow, the host of the show is Chad Douglas. And so what Chad did, that was the year that the movie Paranormal Activity 2 came out. So as a segue into my segment, he decided to run a clip from Paranormal Activity 2, because this was right before Halloween.
Okay, continue.
Okay, this was right before Halloween. So anyhow, Chad begins asking me questions about a place called Rockcliffe Mansion in Hannibal, which is, again, in part of their viewing audience, and we talk about that. And then a little bit later into the segment, he says, now, Larry, have you ever investigated a place that was a little more on the negative side, sort of like what was in the movie clip? And I said, yeah, and I began explaining about the Velisca house. And one of the things I said to Chad was, I said, when all of these strange things were happening after I returned home, one of the strangest things that happened was mechanical things would break down. And they didn't happen occasionally, but all the time, and no matter where I went. So we talked, everything went fine, the interview ends. As soon as the interview's over, they go to a commercial, and here comes a lady and a gentleman out of the back control room. It turns out the lady is the producer for their morning show, and the other gentleman was a technician. And the lady said, Chad, can I talk to Larry for a bit? And she said, sure, we're between segments. And she said, Larry, when you first came here today, and I explained to the people in the back that you were here to talk about ghosts, there was a lot of laughter in the background. She said that people were saying boo to each other, trying to scare each other, and nobody was taking it serious. But she said, as soon as you said, and mechanical things would break down no matter where I went and all the time, she said that basically the first thing that happened was all the overhead lights in the control room started going on and off. And then she said, the next thing that happened was we lost the audio feed from the studio to the control room. We didn't lose the feed, she said, going out, but we lost your feed to us, which didn't make sense. Then she said the next thing that happened was we lost our video feed, followed by computers locking up, followed by personal laptops that aren't on our network locking up. And then she said as soon as the interview was over, everything fired up just like normal. But she said, Larry, I think if you would go back there now, that all those non-believers, I don't think you'll find one that doesn't believe something that went on here today.
Okay, I think we actually maybe got some of the snafu worked out on this. Let's see if we can't go to the next clip and if we can actually play it here.
This is still the math test, correct?
Right. I think this one's ready.
Can I buzz in if I know the answer?
Yes, you can.
I have a quarter here. To answer this question, I'll leave it right on this desk. Heads up, it's 25 cents. You can buy candy with it. Last time. 1 plus 1 equals.
Did you hear it? Did you hear it?
I heard it. It was like boom boom.
Yep.
That quarter is yours. If you want another quarter, knock 1 time.
It didn't respond then. Now, if you go to the next clip, and again, it's against the math test, or maybe I'm asking if he's a boy or a girl.
Okay.
Now let's try this for extra credit. I just need to know if you're a boy or a girl. If you're a boy, knock once. Girl, knock twice.
Immediately,
That
1.
was not you.
See, so now, hesitate before you go to the last one. Bonzi and I were questioning each other. That wasn't you. No, that wasn't you. Man, that wasn't you. Yeah, no, that wasn't me. I'm not moving, So on this one, instead of knocking, you'll hear what sounds like somebody answering by clicking their tongue.
Okay. Let's get this one loaded up.
Last question. This is for extra credit. 1 plus 1 plus 1.
Did you hear that?
That's Bonzi.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bonzi told me this, in all the places he's gone with me, to him, that was probably the most proof that this stuff is real, that anything he's experienced. Not only was
It
it
almost
cool.
brings tears in my eyes, actually.
Well, and you think about it. See, there was also something bad that happened at that school. There was several of the kids had been molested. There was a janitor that was accused of it. No, there was really no proof that he did it, But
Now, before we go any further,
Yeah,
Larry, I hate to
yeah.
interrupt you.
No,
but,
no.
But now, is one of your books focused on this particular place?
Well, my books basically, there's usually 10 to 12 chapters in a book. Each chapter is about a different location. The Where Evil Lurks, the newest book, is about all the events that happened in 2008, again in 2010, and have happened as recently as the writing of the book that seem to be connected to the Villisca House. But the other books are basically, each book is various locations. And they're all locations where we actually either experienced something or multiple EVPs were recorded.
Okay, I think what I want to do before we go into the rest of the EVPs is let's take a few minutes and focus on the new book.
Okay.
Where Evil Lurks. So, what was the inspiration behind the book? First of all, it's relatively new, correct?
It was just released in September.
Okay, wow, really new.
Yeah.
And what is the focus of Where Evil Lurks?
Well, I went to a murder house. It's a long story, even going back to the clairvoyant. There were actually premonitions by 2 other people who were clairvoyant They didn't know where I was going, what the place looked like, anything like that. But I was warned by 2 different people that if I would go to this house, something may happen. They didn't, know where it would happen, but anyhow, so I went to the house first in June of 2008. Not a thing happened. Didn't record an EVP or anything, but the history of the house and the history of the haunting was so etched in my mind that there was a gentleman that I had worked with on several documentaries named Paul Robinson. He's a British gentleman, lives in Kansas City, Missouri, but he did paranormal documentaries. So I contacted Paul and I said, hey, Paul, I've got a good location. Explain the story. Basically, again, the story of the Villisca house is June 10th, 1912. Family of 6. It was Joe and Sarah Moore. Their 4 children, 2 little girls, Ina and Lena Stillinger, who were friends of the family. Picked the wrong night to stay over to play with the kids, but sometime during the night, all of them were killed. There was a total of 8 victims. They were slaughtered with an axe, and I'm talking not just slaughtered, but they were mutilated. But that's basically the murder history of the house. But the basic haunting started. I don't want to say started, but they found out that the place was haunted. This was more like in 1997. A gentleman by the name of Darwin Lynn purchased the house to keep it from being demolished, and he wanted to put it on the National Historical Register. He got that accomplished. He redid the house and put it back in the exact state it was, including original flooring, siding, and all this, as it was in 1910 when the murders occurred. After he got the house completed, there was some press about it, but he said, I refurbished the house, Larry, not knowing anything about paranormal, but about the murder mystery, because that was the history of our town. Anyhow, one day he gets a phone call from a guy that was a former FBI agent, and he said, I'm a paranormal investigator, and I wondered if you would allow me to investigate your house. And Darwin, he's the rural farmer type, and he said, investigate my house? For what? And the guy said, well, for ghosts. And Darwin said, that was the first time I ever heard the term paranormal. So anyhow, the guy came, investigated the house, he recorded a few things, word gets out, and that's basically how it sort of steamrolled. And Paul and I contacted Darwin. He allowed us to use the house 2 days, September 8th and 9th of 2008. Accompanying us was an actress named Sharon Wright from Kansas City, Missouri, who's now out in Hollywood. But anyhow, it was just the 3 of us. We arrived at the house during the afternoon of September the 8th. The owner of the house said, hey, why don't you guys head with me to the cemetery first? I can show you some of the graves of the victims, the alleged culprits. And he took us back to the house. We did our thing. The only 2 things that happened when I was there were, the first thing that happened was right after we arrived, it was about probably 3 o'clock, Paul and Sharon wanted to stay outside and do some of the voiceovers for the documentary. So I decided I'll just go inside, set up some audio, and get things going, So I go inside. Darwin stayed outside to watch Sharon and Paul, just to see, what they were doing. So I go inside. I'm upstairs. I'm in the, I believe it would be the east side of the house, in the children's bedroom. I'm setting up some audio, and I hear somebody walking downstairs. So I'm thinking, this got to be Darwin inside, because I could hear Paul and Sharon outside. So I said, hey, Darwin, is that you? No answer, Darwin, is that you? No answer. So I went downstairs, didn't find anybody. Went back upstairs, looked out the north window, and there's Darwin backing out of his truck. So Darwin hadn't been inside, but I heard footsteps in the house. Later that evening, it was probably 10:30, we returned to the house to start the investigation. And I wanted to show Sharon a picture of Joe Moore and his wife Sarah and 2 of their children that was on the wall. It was one of those creepy old pictures, family photos, and those things always give me the creeps. So I wanted to show her this photo. It's dark in the house. Sharon and I walk in the house. Paul stays outside to bring some equipment in. As we're walking toward this picture, in the parlor there's a back porch, I guess would actually be the front porch. There's a door right by the picture. And I shine the light on the picture, and as soon as I did that, there's a loud bang on the door, like somebody took their foot and actually kicked the door, like they were trying to kick the door in. And it scared the daylights out of us. She grabs onto me, and I'm thinking it's probably one of the locals outside trying to play a joke on us. I quickly run outside, go around the house to the back side of the house. There's nobody there. So I search around the corner of the house, nobody there. And then I noticed that the door that sounded like it was kicked, which would have been the interior door, there's another screen door on the outside that was padlocked, so nobody could have actually kicked the door. But as far as experiences, that's the only thing that we experienced there. But it wasn't until I returned home that the proverbial, hit the fan.
So some of the clips that I have here, like the one that we first played there, the "Come Here, Larry" clip, that was the first clip I found after I came back. But what happened was when I started listening to the audio that very first night, my wife went into the living room to watch TV, and one of the things about the Velisca house, and this is the only house that does this to me, is that when I'm listening to audio, I constantly turn around because I think somebody's standing behind me. So this same particular night, it's about 7:30, 8 o'clock. I'm listening to audio and I have headphones on, and all of a sudden there's somebody behind me. So I think it's my wife. I turn around and see what she wants, and there's nobody there. And so, a few minutes later, I'm looking at the computer screen and I see what looks like somebody walk through the doorway, and they're behind me again. So I'm again thinking it's Kathy or my son. Turn around, see what they want. Nobody's there. A few minutes later, I get this dreadful feeling that something's wrong, that something's not right. Again, I'm the only one in this room. My wife's in the living room. But then the overwhelming feeling of dread changes a bit again because I see what appears to be somebody standing in the doorway. And so I quickly turn and look, and for a brief instant, the light that was coming in from the kitchen was blocked out. But then all of a sudden, nobody's there, and I could see it. And I thought, man, that's weird, but I wrote it off to just being tired from the trip back from Velisca, because it's a 6-hour trip, this is just the next day. So I turn back around, I'm listening to audio, and then all of a sudden, just out of the blue, I feel like somebody take the back of their fingers, go up the back of my neck, and flip my hair, and I immediately shot out of the chair, rolled around, thinking again it was my family playing tricks on me, and there was nobody there. That was the first thing that happened, but then it steamrolled into, and this is a 3-hour story, so I'll make it brief, but then it steamrolled into me seeing shadowy figures in the house, hearing footsteps. One of the weird things that really happened, this is what put me over the edge, was almost 3 months into it. I'm driving home one night down Clear Lake Avenue, and I take the exit, 55 exit south to head home to Taylorville. As I'm taking the exit, I check traffic, I see the lights of the cars, and then I look back at the road, I glance back up at the mirror, and this time I can still see traffic, but on the right side of the mirror, looking back at me, is the face of this old man, and he appears to be in the back seat of my car. Now, backtracking, when I was doing research on the Velisca house, one of the things I found was there was a photo of this old gentleman. He had a long beard, his hair was combed over to the left, and he appeared to be, 70 to 80 years old, somewhere in that range. And the guy his face just gave me the creeps. The story about this photo is that this particular man showed up the day of the murders. Nobody had seen him before. Nobody saw him again after, but that face stuck with me. And then, before I went to the Velisca house, I saw a documentary, and it also featured that photo, and that photo stuck with me. The face I saw in the mirror was the same face as the man in the photo. And that's what, this is toward the end of the book, basically, but that's what made me finally realize that, hey, this isn't things that you're imagining. This is for real.
Right.
But there were other things that happened as well. Like I said, mechanical things would break down all the time. I was at some friend's house in Decatur, and they're into the metaphysical, and they had this crystal singing bowl. This is when all the mechanical things were breaking down. And a crystal singing bowl is basically, a lot of people into the metaphysical use them, they believe it. The humming of the bowl, basically what you do, you take this little mallet with a rubber tip on the end, and you go slowly around like you're stirring a pot of soup on the edge of the bowl, and it makes this humming vibrational sound, and it gets really high pitched, and then they believe that it cleanses energy in your body. So they were using it, everything's going fine, and they said, hey Larry, would you like to use it? And I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. The third revolution around the bowl, it was like a projectile was shot and hit the bowl because it just blew up and shattered into a million pieces. I would go places, people's washers and dryers would stop when I was there, their TV would quit working, their phones would quit working, multiple windshields would be broken, the whole neighborhood basically had broken windshields, and things like that continued to go on. But then the thing that probably bothered me the most was I was constantly hearing my name called. And the voice that was calling my name sounded like my wife. But when I would say, hey Kathy, what do you want? She'd say, I didn't say anything. This went on for a few days. And then finally, one day I was home by myself, and I heard my wife call my name. She's not even home. A few days later, I just came in from outside. It was in October. Came in from outside from mowing the yard, going to the bathroom, going to take a shower, and I hear our garage door go up. I hear the back door going into our kitchen open and slam, and I hear my son yell, "Hey, Dad!" And I yell from the bathroom, "What do you want?" And no response. So I was a little perturbed because I was getting ready to take a shower, and I stepped out of the bathroom. I said, "Corey, what do you want?" There's no answer. He's not there. So I searched the house. Nobody's there. And we have a ranch-style house, so it's a small house. I walked to the back kitchen door expecting him to be in the garage, getting into his vehicle. I opened the door. The garage door is down. The only vehicle in the garage is my vehicle. And besides that, my son always parked outside because it's a two-car garage, and my wife would usually park on the other side. She wasn't home either. Later that afternoon, when my son finally came home, I just asked him, "Did you happen to come home for anything and need something from me?" And he goes, "No, Dad, I just came home." But I would hear voices at work and at home. In my right ear, I heard Larry. And the Larry that I would hear in my ears sounded just like the whisper you heard in the clip. Here's where it gets really bizarre, because not only was I hearing these things, but I worked at the time, I just recently retired, but I worked at the Illinois State Board of Education. There was a lady named Lily that worked there, and no one knew what was going on at the time. I didn't tell anyone. I hadn't written any books. So in our office building, there's probably at that time 400 people. No one knew that I was into the paranormal. But one day, this lady comes to me named Lily, and she says, she had this really weird look on her face, and she said, "Larry, you're not going to believe this. Somebody just whispered your name in my ear." And I immediately said, "Well, which ear?" And she said, "Well, my right ear." And what would happen when this whisper would happen? It was almost like then suddenly you were in a vacuum. You couldn't hear any of the environmental sounds around.
I had a similar. I was in a place that has had quite a bit of documentation on it, the Starry Night Theater in upstate New York, and we were in a place where we were hearing things and also seeing some things, and strangely enough, it was as if, you know, when you have a really bad cold.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's just like something that the eardrum is just.
It's like flying either. Going either up altitude or down.
And I did not get my regular hearing back for almost 3 months after that.
No kidding.
Night.
Well, this would last 15 to 20 seconds, and then you would hear everything again. To me, it happened 4 different times, twice at home and twice at work. And then what was weird, then it happened a second time to this lady named Lilia. She lives in Chatham. It happened to her there again. But again, the first time that it happened to her, she had no idea that any of this stuff was going on. And in more recent years, like even at the writing of this book, some things happened to her while I was writing the chapter about what I just explained to you. When I was writing the chapter about what I just explained to you, she was at work one day, and this is before I retired, so this would have been last fall. And I'm writing the book. I had just finished the chapter on what I just told you about her hearing my voice. The very next day, she comes down into our section, and she sits next to a lady named Jody in our office, and she's talking about this audit. I'm in a complete other section of the building, nowhere near anybody. They're facing each other, and all of a sudden, this lady named Lilia jumps out of her seat, screams Larry Wilson, and does almost like a 180, turning around to see, thinking I'm behind her. She's standing there kind of stunned, and she turns back around to the lady she was talking to, and she said, "Who's just behind me?" And the lady kind of looks at her funny and says, "Well, nobody." So she peeks around the corner of the cubicles, say, "Hey," it's thinking I'm hiding somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And she turns back around, and the lady says, "What happened?" She said, "You didn't hear that, or you didn't see anyone?" She says, "No." And so she said, basically what happened was, she was sitting in the chair, and just out of the blue, she heard my voice yell, "Boo," like I was trying to scare her. But she said it was loud enough that it scared the daylights out of her, and she jumped around. But again, it was the day after I had written a chapter about the experience in 2008 that she had.
This, by the way, has been probably one of the shortest hours we've ever had on the show. Strangely enough, I wish we had booked you for quite a bit longer. And I'll leave the audience with something that's a little more humorous. But for the longest time, I was wanting to pitch a show that was called Ash Hamilton, Asshole to the Dead. Because I have this knack for getting so tired that no matter what happens to me, I'm a complete jerk. It doesn't matter if it's natural or supernatural, I'm an asshole to whatever happens to me when I'm very tired. I was at a place in Converse, Indiana called the Woodcarvers Club. It's a 3-story building. At one point in time, it was headquarters for the KKK. It was around the time of the Prohibition. It was a speakeasy and a brothel. So a friend of mine was going to lead a tour there a ghost tour there. And there was a group, maybe like 12 people out of Chicago that were coming down. Had horrible weather up north. They didn't come down. He said, listen, I know you're going to be a part of this. You can still stay in the building with your wife by yourself. Sure. So this is also a friend of mine that I've known for years and years and years. So I knew that he was going to stick around. We were going to catch up. So I was at a convention earlier in the day. So I had been interviewing people, and we had had press passes. So typically we're there maybe sometimes 2 hours before the doors open to the general public. So we've been up very early, and my buddy and I are talking until probably like 4 in the morning. So at this point, and we had heard things and experienced things throughout the night, when I was aware, when I was a little more cognizant, that affected me more so than the following. My wife falls asleep almost like a narcoleptic. She has a keen sense of when she's tired, and nothing else happens but sleep. I don't have it, except for this one night. So I'm watching TV, I'm lying in bed, I'm nodding off, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey!" Now I'm on the edge of the bed with the remote in my hand, and something smacks the remote out of my hand on the floor. I'm so tired, I just look around the room and go, "What the fuck ever?" And I go back to sleep. I was so tired, I could not get any endorphins up and running. Nothing would happen. And from that point on, I thought, there's got to be novelty in Ash Hamilton, asshole to the dead, where I go to places with extreme sleep deprivation, and they try to get to me, and I'm just a jerk. I'm a huge jerk. Because that's what ends up happening when I don't sleep.
We said sleep deprivation. That's a pretty good point, because things that were happening to us, not only was I hearing things, but I came down with depression, anxiety, claustrophobia, couldn't sleep at night. Claustrophobia got so bad that I couldn't even drive 30 miles to work without pulling over,
wow.
getting out, because it was that bad, you know. And as you mentioned, too, like you were hit in the middle of the night, there were several occurrences in the middle of the night where my face was pushed down into the pillow. My shoulder was pushed down, you know. Then you'd wake up thinking you're having a dream, only to hear footsteps running out of the room.
So, if Travel Channel is listening, I know that they will produce a spin-off show of Zach Baggins eating basically a hot dog. Ash Hamilton, asshole to the dead. I've got the whole thing lined up. I don't sleep much anyways.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, this is money in the bank.
You need a hook.
And this is it. But it has to be Ash Hamilton, Ash Hole.
Maybe
colon.
Just be Ash Hole.
That'd be perfect. That'd be absolutely
You don't have to
perfect.
censor anything.
That'd be absolutely perfect.
Hey, I was contacted by a guy that he wanted to do a location I had done before from the new Ghost Hunter show. His name's John Fitzpatrick. I got his contact information. We'll pitch the show to him.
We'll load me up about 48 hours previous with all kinds of energy drinks, because we really want to get me strung out. I have to be completely strung out on caffeine and any kind of like mood accelerant, and then we'll just put me in the most haunted location, and I'll just be so nonchalantly just unimpressed, and I'll say horrible things, and then that'll be it. It'll be 40 minutes leading up to me with horrible Irish cursing at something that really thought it was going to get the better of me.
Go ahead. No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
This has been the fastest hour. This has absolutely been one, if not the fastest hour we've had on the show. The new book came out in September. Where can people purchase the book locally, and then where can they get it online as well?
Well, locally, currently it's at just two stores. Dana's in Taylorville, and then of course there's a Crazy Daisy gift shop in Petersburg. I'm trying to stay away from the big stores, you know, because basically don't make anything off of them.
Oh, yeah.
So it's available on Amazon, but I'll probably, you know, because it gets out to more people, it'll probably go into Barnes & Noble. I've had the other books in Barnes & Noble, but again, make about 80 cents a copy off a book that like a 96,000 word book, you know, it just doesn't seem fair. But, you know, that's part of it. But one thing I'd like to say, Where Evil Lurks, one of the reasons I wrote the book is because there's a lot of paranormal investigators out there, and they're good ones. I'm not saying that. I didn't expect what happened to me. I was totally blindsided by it. I'd heard stories of other people saying, "Oh yeah, you gotta be careful. They can come home with you." Didn't know if I believed it, but I just want to say, yes, they can.
Well, I think that we've also seen that things can also enter the studio
Yes.
at particular points in time. There was also at one point a knock of something that happened somewhere around the studio that I have absolutely no explanation for either. We want to thank you so much for being on with us,
Absolutely.
Larry.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Do you have a social media presence? Can people friend you somewhere? Can they see what you're doing?
Twitter, L. Wilson UP. They can also, and UP is Urban Paranormal. Urban Paranormal is basically me. I decided about 7-8 years ago that the only way to investigate is alone, because if you record voices and there's no one else there but you, then you may have something there.
I want to thank you for being on, especially
Thank
coming
you.
all the way out here. Like I said, it's a much different experience having someone here in the studio, especially when we're talking about these kinds of things, which have obviously a deep emotional depth to them, and you can really get that feeling when somebody's here in the flesh. I urge everyone to get the new book. We'll put links to it
Thank you.
when the
Appreciate
podcast is released. Everyone can actually watch the video. We'll be uploading it to YouTube. We'll also be uploading the podcast to the site. The podcast is on Stitcher. It's on iTunes. It's on Buzzsprout and about 1 million other places. So at this point in time, it's very, very easy. Night Terrors Radio, you're going to get to multiple places to download it, and not to mention on the site as well, okay? Just get a feed reader, point it right to the site. You're going to get the episode right when it drops. Thank you so much, Larry.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We definitely want to have you back on. Let's
Love
take
to.
a couple moments off the air. For those who are listening live, watching live, we'll be back with Dee Huey, Samantha Marie, Zach Sindel, and director Jonathan Moody. My girlfriend is a serial killer. That's the name of the movie. I'm married. I can't attest to any of this. We'll see you guys in 20 minutes.
See you later.